Good morning, Jamey. Good seeing you, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. So I just, since we are on this call for a few minutes, you already heard me check in. Um,
Yeah.
how are you doing?
Um, I'm fine. I love that we're starting this call with my mouth full of apples and almond butter. Um, I'm feeling pretty good now. I just facilitated a peer group of entrepreneurs, which I love. But I woke, that expression, wake up on the wrong side of the bed. I absolutely had that this morning. I was sort of, you sort of checked in about an activation of yours. I woke up this morning just upset and irritated and kind of hijacked about something. And it took me some time to unhook from it. And then I was like, fine, I'll go for a swim. I have just enough time to go for a swim before. So as I have a routine of jumping in the pool, just like getting ready, walking over, taking a breath, stepping off the ledge and dropping in the pool, pushing off the wall and swimming to the other side underwater. And then, but today, as I was dropping into the water and inhaling, I don't know, something caught in some saliva or something, and I only got like half a breath, not a full deep breath. And then so I was like, man, I wonder if I have enough oxygen to get to the other side. And then I tried to cough and to like clear my throat while I'm underwater. And so now I had no oxygen. My lungs are just like empty. And I'm swimming underwater without oxygen. And I was like, damn it, I'm gonna get to the other side anyway. Yeah, my day has had a quality of like this these events. And the week's been a little manic. We're doing a lot of things. I'm not sure all of them are well-tuned choices. They seem like a good idea in the time, but they lead to driving through traffic for hours to coalesce a set of friends so my son can play soccer. And I'm like, yeah, this is really consistent with my values, but the execution has taken a lot out of me. Yeah, so I'm not, perhaps that's a version of what you're interested in for a check-in. Feeling a little hectic and manic this week, to be quite honest.
It does sound a bit like a mixed bag, where
Mm.
you got to the swim, but it didn't turn out maybe exactly the kind of antidote to the stepping out of bed on the wrong side of the bed or with the wrong foot. Uh, uh, the antidote to that.
It has this internal external quality. It makes me think about getting interested in Jung in the I Ching when I was like in college and be like, is there a quality of the moment that's happening right now? Or is that just bullshit? Like, do I just need to kind of get it together here? Because if I'm living into what might feel like a synchronistic quality of the moment, it's like, yeah, okay, things are a bit disrupted. So how will I respond to that? Things are a bit,
Mhm.
I mean, opening a newspaper, things are very disrupted. Like life is deeply disrupted for a lot of people right now. I'm aware of a level of activation. So what's the right altitude here between deep calm and activation? Like where are we? I feel like navigating these days has a quality of experiencing and then also somewhat choosing what vibe we're going to try to carry.
Mhm. And I'm tempted to tempted to just like stay with the quality. And at least I'm also thinking, yeah, that probably applies to friendships at least as well. But maybe really sticking with the quality of the up and down itself and the calm versus activated state and to navigate that. Yeah, from my experience with you as my coach, and I think now about 4+ years or something of working together.
Yeah, it's been that long. It's great.
It's been that long. Um, I can even just reflecting back on that time say there have been quite a few ups and downs with activation, with bringing into our, more the professional relationship. But I do feel, Jamey, that as a friend, you have brought also so much care and compassionate attention uh, um, into each and every time that we met outside of a coaching call that I feel very little need to draw a firm boundary there, right? So, and me having brought my ups and downs, I certainly have come to appreciate really the benefit to my ability to navigate the ups and downs whenever there is someone else present
Mm.
who can hold the tension, that there is a desire to get through the day, to get through a situation, some other tension intact and with a good path forward. And it does require some activation, some force, some motivation to engage the situation. But coming from this purely activated state would very likely create a lot of problems in a given situation. And so to really navigate that balance. So I really like thinking about maybe with you together how you experience that aspect and maybe even just today. And then um, from your professional experience as a coach, how you help maybe people navigate that tension.
Hmm. Recency bias. I'm on the last part, the coach part of it. But what was the first part of the question? I want to answer it in order.
Yeah, to speak a little bit about your own experience with the tension of calm and activation and the navigation of that, and then how your experience as a coach brings to bear in your not necessarily just professional, but really, I guess, all interpersonal relationships. Whenever people come to you and you notice, oh, they are pretty activated, how
Hmm.
you help people navigate this. Because for me, for instance, I believe I can be a better friend to people if I can notice, yeah, this person is activated, and I can then have a not professional distance, but sufficient distance to hold the tension. And I can really tell, even just, one aspect that I've brought to coaching sessions a couple of times in my relationship with Chang Yu, with my husband, it is frequently still more a pattern of co-activation where we both get triggered into a state of this is something that could be just like not being able to breathe underwater, where I could run out of oxygen, I could run out of resources here. And it's just this experience, right? And we both have it. And by then tightening, trying to cough and get it out, it really creates a situation in the relationship with my husband where moving beyond the immediate stimulus, moving beyond the tension becomes actually much, much harder.
We had a conversation recently about jazz,
Mhm.
not jazz, the musical style, although that's an expression of it, but the jazz of hearing what's going on and finding that in finding a place to enter and contribute. Yeah. there's so many directions I can go from that because you sort of acknowledged our relationship as in coaching. It's a pleasure to coach you. The way you think is really interesting. I get a lot out of coaching you, even just hearing how you're thinking. And then to go a little more down that thread about approaching this as a coach, approaching relationship as a coach. I think ideally, really, we're trained as professional coaches to have that really all the sort of engine, the creative generation of it to come from you. My contribution to the jazz is to try to ask questions that are in tune with where you're going, but you finding it. Maybe something a little better than a metronome, but without too much. Trying to find a jazz metaphor. I want to say spin on the ball, like we're playing tennis now. But in jazz, maybe without too much, like you get excited and you start the drum beat becomes a little too heavy. And now you're like,
Mhm.
hey,
Mhm.
now I'm becoming so that the sound balancing is just right, or even a little subtle. And then you're the one that's amplified and you hear yourself amplified. Um, you're kind of teaching yourself whatever it is you're teaching yourself while I'm kind of playing a supportive role, like I'm holding the bass line or I'm doing something that's supportive. Um, no, I don't always coach that way or that well, right? I have all kinds of thoughts that come banging in that I think are so interesting. There they go. But professionally, that's not the idea of it. And sometimes they are useful, perhaps. And sometimes it's better to just stay out of the way.
I very much like that you brought in this aspect that we've spoken about before, jazz. And I just want to point out the elements that for me, as it relates to friendship and to relationship, in my experience, improve my ability to be a good sparring partner, a good jazz partner, a good relational partner. The first would be openness and curiosity, that no matter how the other person plays, I'm not rejecting what they're offering into the conversation, into the relationship as either irrelevant, as so poorly played that nothing can be made of it, or as dangerous, or as, you know, they have just played a couple notes and it could sound like, oh, damn it, Jochen, I mean, why do you always have to do this at home and like make a mess? Okay, that's a piece of a jazz tune. Okay. Listening into that piece. What what do I listen? What do I hear in that piece? And then a really important bit of jazz for me is the creativity, is to allow myself to be not just either a mirror, because then it's just like pushing back almost and be like whatever, or like it's very mechanical. And at the same time, not to be, a punching bag or some other thing that can happen in relationships, but really to creatively take, okay, the person that I'm in relationship with in this very window, in this context, has given me a tennis serve.
Hmm.
And I want to keep the ball on the field and I want to create a rally. I want to create a nice set of back and forth here.
Mhm.
And how do I respond to that? And of course, jazz then also has other aspects like rhythm or a beat, a steady beat. where if I respond to that with a 10-minute sermon, like I'm doing right now with you, I'm sorry, that can be tough. And so I'm going to come to an end in a minute, no, in a second. But yeah, to allow for a flow in the conversation. And with that, I'm giving the ball back to you.
Mhm. And the choices we can make at a break point in a conversation. Do I direct it in a different place? Do I take, okay, it's like my trumpet's going to come in now. Is that just going to cut the air? And that's interesting. Or is it more muted and it's like in the landscape of what you've been doing or what? Um, well, I'll cut the air a little and just go back to your other questions about how I find that vibe. Probably sometimes it's unconscious, sometimes it's conscious, but even talking about it like this is useful. It reminds me that there's a choice of there's a way that I feel, there's a way that I sort of seem to have been in a stream of feeling, and I can choose, I can still make choices about behavior and what I do. How I address my kids, you know, Liam comes out and he's like, "Hey, let's have French toast this morning." I'm like, "Right, make French toast." Oliver's still in bed. I'm like, "Man, is he going to be late to school again?" And I can go yell at him, but I know how useless that is. So instead, I just jump in bed with him and I just acknowledge, like, I'm like, "Hey, you know something? What did I say? I don't know, some just acknowledgement of appreciation of something he did yesterday that I really liked, and reminding them that they have a day and a half of school left and it's summer. If Now I'm talking about parenting more than friendship, but it all relates to this. Can I control my own needs enough to like notice what's useful in this moment? Or do I have some need to add to to create chaos and add to the chaos? I can trigger Oliver. That's that's a well-developed. If I want to piss everyone off, I know right where to go with that one. But can I find a groove? Okay, so that's one piece. I'm going to cut it there. The other, I want to just that I was reflecting on non-judgment as you're talking about in friendship non-judgment. Certainly in coaching non-judgment, because I'm not there in coaching to love the person. I care about them. I'm concerned for them and whatever, but it's not a love relationship. But to me, in friendship, um, there's a baseline that's beyond non-judgment. Because sometimes there is judgment and it's connectedness and consistency and longevity over um, twists and turns and hills and valleys. And for example, sometimes I probably need some feedback from my best friends to reorient. I heard some podcasters talking about they were talking about a international footballing star. I've forgotten who. And they were like, wow, he's behaving like such an asshole. Like, and they said it compassionately. Like, doesn't he have any good mates? Where are the people that are supposed to be around him telling him, bro, you need to like modulate a little bit. You're coming off looking really stupid.
And that piece to me in jazz is this invitation or the challenge that people give one another in the back and forth to improve their game. Right. So I'm hearing you say whatever it is that the notes that you just played. And let me see if by playing just a little bit more sophisticated, I can like give you the idea. Well, no, dude, uh, that's the way to play, don't you think? But it comes across not maybe as a moral judgment, as more like a performance judgment. It's a skill-based, if you will, is maybe, I don't know how triggering this word is, a meritocratic judgment, right? It's about merit, not morals. I'm not saying you're a bad person for playing this way, but you could play so much better. And by making it about the skill and not the individual as the value of the individual, but the value of your skill, and that you could contribute right here if you upgrade your playing skill. That'd be so much fun that we could have. And that to me is this experience of jazz where even listening to it, like the music, at least in my imagination, I have this experience of they had so much fun recording this.
Mm. It's a conversation, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
back and forth conversation. And I think some of the layers of it are longitudinal, they go way back. How has this, it said there's some flavor of the relationship that's been built for as long as they've been playing. Did they meet tonight and play together? And there's that liveliness of meeting someone, being a little interested, slightly infatuated, who knows? Or is this a relationship that has like terroir to it? They've been together for 25 years playing jazz, and they know they can anticipate what the other is going to do. You can play moves and moves ahead. What's on tonight? And is it even still fresh? I'm influenced right now by the backdrop behind you because it makes me think of this notion of being older and what friends will be like older. And to me, that adds a longitudinal. I feel lucky to have some really good friends around, and I imagine a scene almost exactly like that. Although I don't know, maybe shooting rubber bands at kids on bikes also, not just like looking into the sunset. But 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 um I can think of the people I want on that porch with me. And and when I think about the emotive quality of what it means to be there, we can be creating now, but we're also telling old jokes that we've told 100 times. And we're also reigniting lessons we learned. Remember being in Barcelona, and then we got this apartment, and we're working at the Olympics. And then there's a couple next door with a baby, and we slept so long. I mean, we needed to sleep so badly, but we couldn't sleep because the baby was crying the whole time in our next room in our apartment. And then the next day, the baby was gone. And where the hell did the baby go? Like, what? Like, I've only had those experiences with Matthew. And if he's sitting on the porch with me, then we're talking about these strange reminiscences that no one else has. We hold each other's memories in some way. That matters a lot to me.
It brings back from either books that I've read or movies that I watched a number of scenes that have this quality for me. And you didn't explicitly ask, but I can tell you the reason that I created such an image using like an AI image generator, and the prompt that I gave really had to do with this experience of meeting someone with whom there is shared history, where we can reference things that happened in the past, and ideally even where there's very little need to go into all that much detail because the other person already resonates if I just say a couple of keywords.
Mhm.
It's almost like in jazz, if you can say, oh yeah, blues schema, so and so, this style, that pattern or whatever, or I just give it a title or whatever, and then I can just be with the other person, and there's no more need to do a lot of steering the cart. I mean, at that moment, it's just like enjoying the ride. And
Enjoying the ride. Yeah.
that is a wonderful quality of experience that friends that I've had a long history with, where that can just come about.
And do they, those friends, you do you carry parts of them in how you operate, how you see the world, how you
I would almost say by virtue of me having absorbed some of their how they express themselves and being able to represent this accurately enough so that we can have this. It's a little bit like I imagine if a surgeon has, let's say, a specific person that they always work with, and a glance is enough for the other person to know, okay, now it's like another set of, I don't know, cotton balls, or I need to hand this or this other tool, right? And there's no more need to speak a lot. It's a little bit like in this scene from Lord of the Rings, where after everything is done, and at the very end of the story, it's something like Elrond, Galadriel, and Gandalf meet. And I think the lines in the book say something like, and they just sat there at the fire, not saying a word, and just by looking at each other's faces, they knew exactly what the other people were thinking and could follow that story without a single word being spoken
Hmm.
because they had lived through the second and third age, and they knew what Sauron had done and what they had done and how the war had gone, and like they knew all of that. And just by looking at each other to say, yeah, that happened there and that happened there, and you don't have to say anything.
Hmm.
And like another movie that comes to mind, and it has a very different tone or flavor, but the story, right, with in Forrest Gump, with what's the other guy's name, the Baba Shrimp, whatever, Cutter, and where he fulfills that person's dream and then has this kind of like carry on over and meets the family. Even there, I would say, so you were asking me whether I am carrying my friend's essence somehow. And I would say yes. I certainly, with regards to how my friends have expressed themselves in our friendship, I can carry that. Just when I, for instance, now meet my late cousin's widow and we speak about him, there's still elements that I can bring to that conversation that come from a time when she didn't even know him because I grew up with him as a kid. And I can see how bringing that essence of a person into a conversation can really make that essence come alive in that context.
Hmm. I don't know if your brain works this way, Jochen. Um, I have these sensory kind of feelings that I attach to people. I have little vignettes that live in me that I cherish, like a little art museum within me. And one of the things that you said about writing together or something, I don't think I have the language exactly right, had me immediately back in Greece with my friend Dino in 1996. We were adventuring around, having fun. We took kayaking on some remote river near the Albanian border, just like messing around, having fun. And he had this old Volvo that I think it was called Amazona, or it was the car was called an Amazona, or he had named it the Amazona, and he talked to it like it was an animate thing. And what I learned from him somehow was about, like he's like, look, here we drive like we're all driving, like if you see something, say something. Like, I'm not offended if you tell me there's a pedestrian I need to not hit, that's fine. So we're all like expect everyone to drive to get like communally. And the whole experience and the friendship. I haven't seen Dino in, I don't know, at least 20 years, 25 years. Seeing him this weekend, by the way. He lives in South Carolina. My son wants to go fossil hunting. And I was like, hey, we're coming to South Carolina. He's like, great, stay with us. Of course, we love each other. I don't know. What is it that I love? It's these memories, the depth of the relationship, and the things that I've learned about myself that I cherish. These like illuminated canvases in my internal art museum are have Dino's imprint on them permanently. They'll still be there when I'm on the porch, the Friendship Matters porch behind you. They will. That's kind of how I carry some of my identity in relationship with others. Whether we're together for 2 decades or not, it's all right there. How do you do it?
Um, as I bring people to mind, there are definitely qualities that I have perceived in them that stand out as so significant or remarkable. I can easily remark on them. They're really, yeah, like pictures of a sound or a smell or a taste or a painting. It's maybe not a museum, but certainly some kind of maybe an arboretum or like a living place, uh, a
Mm-hmm.
greenhouse of sorts,
Mm-hmm.
where yeah, the different people in my life and the relationships that I've cultivated with them are living beings. And I find it even very difficult maybe to completely separate, or maybe I shouldn't even try to separate the person and the relationship because the qualities are very, very melded with one another. And the word that you use that piqued my interest is identity. Because, yeah, indeed, I may have mentioned this to you. I've definitely mentioned it to a number of people now. The trip that I took to Japan and Korea, I really learned about myself. I enjoy being in unfamiliar places and exploring them and recognizing my ability to just look at a map and not be scared and go wherever I want to go and see interesting architecture, buildings, sites. And yet, what made this trip really worth my while and the effort was the people that I met.
Mm.
And so for me, if I had to pick a category of experience that I imagine is most relevant for who I feel I am myself as an identity, it would be the kinds of friends and some specific friends in particular, like really individuals. And without them in my life, yeah, I can only imagine I would be an entirely different person.
Mm-hmm.
And there's definitely really 5, maybe 10 people that I could point to who, by virtue, not because they wanted to change the course of my life, not because they pushed me in a direction, but because they opened a door, sometimes even a career door, right? So, like, I have a friend who opened the door for me to come to New York City and get a job at Columbia University. And if that hadn't happened, I would be an entirely different person today, like without question. And similarly, I've had experiences where someone opened a door to an inner experience, like the person that I fell in love with, and then had this very kind of messy fallout and follow-up situation with. Yeah, if that had not happened, I equally would be a very different person today.
Hmm.
And I wouldn't say it would be less interesting. So I'm not making this as a judgment of like better or worse, but that the person who I am today, that I feel is the essence of Jochen as a story, to a large extent, is based on the people who were most closely in my awareness at some point, who sowed some seeds of here's something interesting you could try and explore. How about this? And by following up on that, I then shifted into entirely new directions.
I was interested in what you said about being an entirely different person, if not for this falling in love and then having it end in a messy way or reignite and then end or whatever happened there. I mean, without needing to go into detail about what happened, what is it that gives you the idea that that particular thing happening shaped you so much?
Um, so even as a teenager, I enjoyed stories that depicted longing, like the longing for the good life, if you will,
Hmm.
that depicted that longing as something worth pursuing. Like you are, that was some of the gist that I took from those stories. As a human being, you are living a more fulfilled life if you allow yourself to long.
Hmm.
But it was more or less like I, until I had this experience with this person, it was something that I had read in stories about, but that I certainly hadn't dared myself to actually live in an embodied way.
Hmm.
But this person really gave me access to, oh, wait a minute, actual people, real flesh and blood people do this, and they don't end up on the trash heap of history. And that was like a revelation because somehow I had grown up in my early adulthood, 20s, 30s, mostly thinking if you find a place somewhere on this heavily populated planet where you don't get into trouble and you don't get in between the gears of history and you don't get squeezed and pressed into like a pulp and you just make it through in one piece
Hmm.
with a decent enough experience, play some video games, eat out in restaurants, a couple of vacations here and there, that's a-okay, right? But I didn't have this, oh, I can long for things, I can really put my mind to an, like, orient myself towards an aim that makes my heart ache and pursue that and still have a better life for it. And so, just to give you one example of what this person shared with me fairly early on when we met. So, he had been in a number of messy relationships. And as part of one of them, and I forget whether he was in Amsterdam and the person he was with was in Geneva or whatever, but like they were both in Europe. And then at some point the other person told him, oh, by the way, I am available this weekend. And he was just like, yeah, like this is worth so much. I'm getting a last minute flight. And he spent like an insane amount of money for a weekend to visit someone. And initially I was just like, yeah, that sounds like a crazy story. That sounds like something like that maybe a crazy person would do. But then I understood, wait a minute, what do I care about? Like, what would it be in my life that I would spend an insane amount of money on if I felt spending the money would actually get me closer to the thing that I want? And I don't think it's a question that many people ask themselves. What would it be? What would be one thing that if I could give half of what I own, or if I feel I have a shot at that, what at least would it be that I would do that for? And that person opened that door to me. And of course, it also opened a lot of like, because once you start looking at that, you recognize a lot of the inner parts that have had their longings covered up for a long time and that feel totally inadequate because they have been told all the time that's stupid, that's ridiculous, that's all kinds of stuff. Don't look at that. And I had to work through that. And it was really, really painful. So painful to recognize all of these messages that I had been told were very well meaning of people in the culture who try to tell people. And I don't want to come across as now being a complete naive romantic. We're like, oh, always follow your longing. No, the point is not that following your longing is easy or safe or that there are no risks or whatever. No, not at all. Instead, I would say don't give up on it and just become very clear what it is. Because there may in your life come, I don't know, maybe a handful of moments where if your longing is alive, all of a sudden the door will open, maybe only a crack, and you will see some sunlight coming through and you will have this experience. My goodness, here's a person who could really, I could get there within 5 minutes if I wanted to.
Mm.
And you don't want to miss it.
Mm.
You really don't want to miss it.
Mm.
So at least be connected to it,
Mm-hmm.
to feel those opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Just as I still find it so incredible. And I can tell you, for instance, without meeting this person 13 years ago, 14 years, no, 13 years ago, I would never have, I think, dared to reach out to this jazz pianist who I met in person in Korea.
Mm.
Because it's like, how ridiculously unlikely is that? And now I'm just like, I don't care how unlikely it is. That's not the point. The point is, do I want it? And am I willing to try? And then I have to see what happens. But
Mm.
not to give up on that longing and to really have this very alive sense in me that is what is valuable for me.
Mm-hmm. And there's so much passion in this approach to living, right? I mean, at least I hear it. And it cuts to a fundamental piece of what have you decided living is for
Mhm,
anyway.
mhm.
And who else do you allow to try to inform that? How well do they hold the assumptions that you hold?
I feel some bubbly amusement at the moment because you didn't specifically put it into the form of a question, but it is a question, right? Um, yeah, for me, there is a inexplicably and impenetrably to perceive path towards a future where all of the forces that are expressing themselves in our world have managed to align themselves into a whole, such that just like the forces within my body, digestion and blood circulation, breathing and moving and everything, where all of these different processes are happening at the same time and sometimes, like up and down, but they all have arranged themselves in a fashion where they don't get into each other's hair, other than when you cough underwater and you don't have enough oxygen to reach the other side of the pool. But those are momentary experiences that you can then become aware of and then rectify.
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, and that's the thing, I cannot see the path, but there is this longing for being on the path to that future, where all forces that I experience have aligned themselves in a way where just in a good jazz piece, yeah, there's still tension there, and there's a desire to dance and passion. But listening to it, I'm not walking away with an experience of like, that was so terrible. And of course, it may sometimes also require my education to fully appreciate the messiness in a jazz piece, not as a fault, but as a feature. But for me to upgrade myself to a configuration where I can recognize the messiness as a feature and where I am able to interact with the people around me in a manner by which the forces that they bring to the table and the forces that I want to exert are much more likely to be in alignment. That
Mm-hmm.
for me is a path worth pursuing. And yeah, like even just a friend who I consider a friend that I met last year in March, who I also am hoping to meet in person one day. And I haven't told him that yet, but I had this insight literally last night. He represents to me almost the embodiment of longing
Mm-hmm.
in a very innocent. There's such an innocent longing in this person that I perceive and that I believe other people perceive, because I think a lot of people have come to this person in a way where I feel, oh, they can all see it. I don't know whether they can verbalize it, whether they can actually make this into a conscious representation, but they all recognize, God damn it, this person is able to do something that I wish I knew how to do better, which is this process of allowing yourself to long and to just talk about it, not in a way by which you say, if this doesn't happen tomorrow, life sucks, but where you keep, like water smoothing over the stones in the bed of a river. You just keep on letting your water run over those stones, and over a long period of time, they become a very comfortable basis from which to operate.
Mm-hmm.
And it requires this persistent to long. And I think what he is longing for concretely is very different, probably, from what I'm longing for. So I'm not saying we have the same longing, but he is unabashedly longing.
We've shared a number of good metaphors in this call. But I love that image of the water over the stones. It's just, I'm just hanging with that. I'm also hanging back on your amusement with my asking a question but not framing it as a question, which my amusement returns toward you in that sort of productive, maybe cultural German way of being logical enough to say, if you're going to ask a question, ask it. There's some joy for me in speaking in ellipses. And I think for me, it somehow acknowledges that we don't really know. We're just generally putting notions in the air and seeing what happens.
And that for me is a lot of the quality of this gentle water, which probably on the level of like if you could see what the water molecules do to the surface of a stone, it probably wouldn't look very gentle. Because yeah, they will erode layer by layer, bit by bit, right? So they take something away and take another thing away, but they do it in a very slow fashion, right?
Mhm.
It never has this quality of like I'm going to use a hammer and a chisel and cut the thing in two, and then I'll take the piece that I like better and work with that. No, no, you always leave the stone in one piece, and you just very, very gently, kind of like,
So that means not too much doing, or not too much violence in the doing anyway. Just allowing somehow. Is that what
yeah.
you're saying?
And I I'm not suggesting that that is the appropriate manner of applying force in every situation. There are situations that really require a hammer and a chisel.
Hmm.
Um, but that certainly the way of water
Hmm.
speaks more to it resonates in my soul as just like more pleasant.
Sounds like a Zen manuscript here, or a screenplay for a Bruce Lee movie or something.
It certainly reminds me a little bit of you and I. In fact, you introduced a lot of the concepts to me in my consciousness. Not that I have gone to a physical Aikido dojo, but in Aikido, the manner by which playing with forces that come at you
Hmm.
is not done from a stance of violent defiance,
Yes.
but loving understanding,
Hmm.
right? How to diffuse the damaging potential in that force such that in the relationship between the person bringing the force, we can move on from here undamaged and potentially friends,
Yeah.
right? Someone comes at you with a very harsh remark, and you take that and turn that around into, oh, that's a compliment. Do you want to tell me more?
There's something beautiful in this approach that has detachment in it, that has humor in it, and that also has calm, power in it, like the water. I'm not,
And
I'm
the
not, by the way, I don't claim to be good at Aikido myself, but I'm around people who are, and how it seems to infuse the air around them
Mhm.
and the grip of their toes into the earth is very beautiful to see.
and this is maybe where for me the principles behind jazz and the principles behind Aikido meet, and where I apply them, let's say, to the more interpersonal and verbal communication
Mhm.
domain. Because it does feel a little bit like verbal jazz or communicative jazz or relationship jazz or verbal Aikido or communication Aikido or relationship Aikido, where Sure, yeah. If someone came to me and is like, 6'5" tall and 220 pounds and, tried to throw me through the room, yeah, they could do that. And there would be not, likely nothing that guy could do about the physical reality. But can I learn to deal with the verbal equivalent of that? If someone wants to throw me for a loop verbally, can I take the force out of that and with a little kind of like almost sleight of hand stage visual, like magic, like an illusionist, be like, oh, that's what you wanted to do, but I have a trick up my sleeve. But in a way where it doesn't harm the other person, but where it just demonstrates in a friendly way, hopefully. Yeah, we could go down the path of talking to one another in this way. But I don't really want that. And I somehow I don't think you want that either. How about we play on this level?
What uh what's energetic about that scenario for you that you want to kind
First
of
person energetic,
play it through?
probably still the experiences I've had with my next older brother growing up.
Hmm.
Oh
Hmm.
my goodness. Into how many not sticky situations, but messy situations, like really kind of hair on end, pants
Hmm.
on fire kinds of situations we got. I think I told you there was this one evening where where we said things over the dinner table to one another, where at one moment I just didn't know what else to do. And I picked up fork or knife and threw it at my brother. It ended up in a glass carafe on the table. Luckily, it didn't end up in his face. I don't have a memory of like consciously misdirecting it, but like something intervened probably. It didn't hit him. But that for my parents was like the sign of like we need family therapy, and that's where we went. But clearly this experience of, yeah, if people don't resolve the forces that they direct at one another, sooner or later they may end up just like nations or groups of people in a warlike conflict
Hmm.
where both sides have this experience. It's either you or me. And ultimately, which is for me one of the things that I've become aware of, right? So I remember this from, I think, Trump's first campaign, where he said, like, we'll be winning so much you'll be tired of winning. And I don't know whether he understood what he was actually saying, because for me, what this means is when you have that approach to any dispute, any situation where you have the experience, it's either me or the other person or us or them. Whenever you have that experience, there are no winners, certainly not in the long term, because you can only ever win one little argument. You win for a minute, maybe for a month, maybe for 4 years, but you will not win. The only thing that you do is instill in the other side even more resentment, trying to get you with a bigger hammer next time. That's what you're doing. And how can that be winning? It's just like, it really escapes me how anyone would ever call that winning, other than in a very shallow sense of like, yeah, I won this one match. Which is for me, in part, why sport and music are these domains where we have sublimated our impulse to seek domination
Hmm.
into a domain where we recognize it can be fun to play with this experience of wanting to be better than, but where it is completely taken out of the realm, unless you have hooligans, of, of actual physical harm.
Yeah.
And similarly, I would hope that with maybe verbal Aikido or jazz, you can also do that in the actual verbal domain rather than having it escalate into like a thrown knife or fork, or worse.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe the experience is different for people who prefer a different modality, visual or musical or verbal or physical.
Yeah. Yeah.
tactile, interpersonal, or person with natural forces. Some level of activation. You seem to you've gone back a couple times to the theme of me being underwater this morning without oxygen.
Hmm.
There's choice in there. I did the whole setup. And then even when I decided to go ahead to the other side anyway without oxygen, there's a calculation that I thought I could make it. Was I calculating all the variables? The lifeguard's a kid. He sees me swim all the time. He knows I'm a good swimmer. He's not worried about me. How long would I be underwater before he came for me? Uh, I've got 3 kids. Like, what am I doing? Like, where is the line between intentional activation, risk? Is that producing a sense of aliveness? I don't know. Maybe it's my version of your enjoy. I don't want to say enjoyment. I'm not sure how to characterize your relationship to longing. But to me, if there's a currency in my mind somehow in my makeup, it's about challenge.
Hmm. Yeah. It's
What
like,
what can I do? What can I try?
so this is something where, and I'm still in different engagement domains of my life, trying to integrate that insight, that longing, aliveness, passion, challenge, they all speak, I think, to the same reality, which is life wants to be more than it already is. You have some state, and it's just not enough. And of course, like words like greed come to mind as the pathology side of that. Because, yeah, as you said, there's choice, right? And you can slide that slider of I want more than I have, or I want to be more than I am. You can slide that all the way and forget about all other domains and make one domain a single-minded, like, I want to be the first on Mount Everest, even if I die.
Mhm.
Yeah, so right, you can push it to the limit,
Mhm.
but never to slide this slider in any direction at all. That's just like, why are you even alive? So I think life itself has this quality that it wants to do something with it.
And where does friendship play into this?
Mhm. So one of the other people I spoke with, Leslie Yergers, she mentioned, and I don't know if you've ever watched any of the Stoa sessions, Peter Limburg's a notion of friendships of virtue. And he has explored this both in writing and I think with other people in dialogue. For me, as I make choices in life that hopefully guide me towards greater flourishing, greater passionate expression in challenging directions that I find valuable, where I experience value with those challenges and then I want to push myself. But as I make choices on that path, I will have blind spots. Oh my goodness, how many blind spots. I may overestimate my ability. I may forget about certain risks. The lifeguard at the side of the pool may have a conversation and you may not have seen it. And the guy tells you, hey, Jamey, right now is not the moment to experiment with like how long you can breathe underwater, or rather not breathe underwater, because the guy's on the phone, right? You may just not have awareness of certain facts. And the benefit of having friends is their awareness is typically not where my awareness is. And so they can open to me vistas of things that I am blind to
Hmm.
within myself and within the outside world. And by then being willing to take what they say, not as a moral judgment, if they, for instance, say, hey, that sounds crazy because like all of this could happen. And even if they mean it in a way where they want to restrict me, it is still, that is then my choice. The primary choice of always saying, what can I extract from that which my friends offer to me that helps me make better choices within the challenges that I want to pursue? And of course, it then matters to choose friends that do that well.
Yeah, and badly. Now I'm thinking, you know, I was trying to think about dating. I listened to dating podcasts, and there is an attraction to this notion of someone who's a beautiful mess. You see all kinds of flaws, and you're like, oh, how lovely. Look at these flaws. I'll raise my hand. I'm susceptible. Maybe it's
Oh,
because I'm plenty flawed myself. My good friend Matthew, who I mentioned the other day, he's deeply interested in fishing in the Long Island Sound these days. He caught a number of bluefish this week and is thinking carefully about how to prepare them and vein them and make them good to eat. But before that, he was in Dakar trying to get his car repaired and surfing in the, effluent of the city among diapers, but the waves were good. Like just making choices that just sound ridiculous and beautiful. And there's like, and I think to myself sometimes, what are you doing, man? And I think to myself, how beautiful. And it's this quality of ridiculousness that we carry together. Um, whether we think each other's choices are just like comedic or serious and important or beautiful or something else. I'm grateful for people around me making other kinds of choices. Just gives me some perspective on mine.
so this is maybe the other aspect of friendship that doesn't speak so much to directly relating to choices that I'm making and providing me with very pertinent and related information, but that I have also friends who I explicitly told in conversation, I am so glad that you allow me to be that you give me a front row seat to your life stage where I can see everything going on in detail. And you share with me your thoughts and experiences about the things that are going on. Because I can draw from that so much more than from a book or a movie. Because I can actually ask you things. I can, check out things with you, which how many times have my husband and I watched a TV series and he asks me, what do you think? Why do you think this character does this?
Yeah.
And my standard answer has become because the writers needed that in that moment for the
Right.
story to develop. Because that is not a real person. And they just made it up. And the person that you would have to talk to are the writers, right? Like you can't talk to the character. That is a made up story. But in a real life story, yes, it and that's the thing. It is still a character because I am carrying my character. The character of Jochen is still a character, but it is a character that some other people can talk to, just as I can talk to other people's characters.
So speaking of friendship, I just learned that I have um, a friend who's visiting from Puerto Rico who's waiting outside, got here early. I could invite him in to the podcast you're doing, or we can also sort of aim to
Um,
wrap up here.
I'm first of all, I'm super happy if that were to happen for a few minutes. Why don't you just see where he is at, and we can just like later I'll take this piece out of the recording, and then we see how it goes.
I got here early, just parked under in your neighborhood. Yeah, okay. Okay, we can cut this out. Yeah. So excuse me breaking the flow there.
I don't know. And yeah, I even feel that my energy is now moving in a direction of just saying, Jamey, have a blast with your friend who is there in the flesh, which for me, that that is where a lot of my passion is. That would take precedence. If I for a moment imagine a friend from somewhere, San Francisco, had told me, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna come to your work building and let's go out for lunch," and the person was here right now, I would also say, "Jamey, I'm sorry, I have to go."
Yeah. I like that. Rather than trying to, I did a natural thing of wanting to hook back into the sort of flow of the conversation. Let me just say, well, it's nice to explore with you as always and to think about this. Has me kind of thinking of friendships. Um, One thing I appreciate about our friendship, which I haven't commented on, is this exploratory quality. It's a little like traveling. And when we talk, I'm traveling in my mind to different things. I'm trying to make sense of the things that you are saying. I'm actually trying to understand you by relating it to experiences that have gone on for me. And the personalization of that effort is full of images from my own consciousness. So it's like relating to you. In that sense, my relationship to you is a construct of my own source material in consciousness. And you're doing something else over there.
The things that you have shared with me about your your life situation and everything going on for you, I think it's very, very similar for me in that if, for instance, if I had never ever been in love, some of
Mm.
the things that you shared with me about, yeah, your experiences with partners would have been difficult to follow.
Yeah.
Because how do you reference that if you have no primary experience with it at all?
Yeah.
And so I think that that is and it's not a limitation. I think that is a feature because precisely by making this effort, you are building this bridge out into the relational space where you then meet the other person.
Yeah.
So it is your own building materials, but the instructions come from the other side.
Yes. And together it's a co-construction too of something. And actually, as I was preparing for this call, I was thinking about this notion of there's you, there's everything going on with you, around you, within and around. Same for me. And then there's some project of construction that is our friendship. Or in another modality, our coaching relationship. The quality of that coaching relationship sits kind of as its own entity in a way that we both build toward. But if we're here, we're focusing on friendship. I've concluded, and maybe crudely, that the friendships I value the most are have a lot to do with volume of time spent together
Mm.
in salient moments of growth where the relationship part of it is valuable or funny or memorable in some way. Reaffirming is giving me what I need at some level.
Hmm.
Yeah. At some point, we're all going to be on some porch. I mean, if we're lucky, we'll be sitting on a porch beside a friend we really love, watching the sun rise or set or whatever it's doing there.
In a way, this conversation already had quite some of that quality. And, luckily, it's a porch from which I can then get up and still do lots of other stuff. So it's not a terminal porch.
Those guys
Just,
can still stand. That's good.
maybe I need to think about a slightly different graphic over time.
No, no, it's not.
Benjamin Button style.
I don't mean to be judgmental or ableist or something. I don't know. It's fine. Oh man. Okay, well, this has been lovely, Jochen.
Until not too long from now when we meet for our regular coaching call.
Sounds
Thank
great.
you.
Okay.
Jamey, have a wonderful time with your friend. And
Will do.
until then,
Okay.
bye
Bye.
bye.